welcome to an opportunity to hear about Colombia, South America, and South America from our guest this evening, Professor Marcos Peckel. And I'm glad that we were able to do this. And before I do my introduction, I would like to introduce to you Rabbi Nathan Weiner.
So welcome, everyone, to members of Congregation Beth Tikva, folks from the Jewish Community Relations Council, our larger South Jersey Jewish community, Professor Peckel, and community and congregational leaders, Bruchim Habaim, welcome and bienvenidos. Tonight, we gather together in virtual community to learn about European Jewish migration to South America and the South American Jewish experience. Together, we'll expand our minds, learning from the professor, understanding the experiences of Jews with experiences different from our own here in Southern New Jersey. A special thank you at the outset to the JCRC for co-sponsoring this event and Aaron for running the tech, and specifically to the Adult Ed Committee led by Scott Becker at Congregation Beth Tikva for bringing this learning to all of us. Now, in Breshit Chaf Chet, Genesis 28, verse 14, we read the charge to Jacob. Ufaratzta, 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 as the song repeats it, Yama v'kedma tzafona v'negba. You shall spread out to the west, to the east, to the north, and to the south. Now, here's what it fully says in verses 14 and 15. It says, your seed shall be as the dust of the earth, and you shall spread out to the west, to the east, to the north, and to the south, and in you and in your descendants shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Wherever we are, we as Jews bring blessing, whether it's in Israel, which we'll talk about tonight, whether it's our communities in North America, whether it's Professor Peckel and the work that he's doing in South America. Verse 15 says, behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go. May we all be kept, may we all be learning, may we all continue to grow one another as we connect with Jews around the world. So once again, wherever you are, north, east, south, or west, on behalf of CBT and the JCRC, bienvenidos and welcome. Scott, return it to you.
Let me just give you a brief introduction to Professor Peckel, and we'll start it off. So Professor Peckel was born in Bogota, Colombia, to German Jewish parents. He graduated from Israel Institute of Technology in Haifa, Israel, and earned a master's degree from McGill University in Montreal, Canada. He currently serves as the executive director of Confederation of Jewish Communities of Colombia, Commissioner to Combat Anti-Semitism at the Latin American Jewish Congress, and an executive member of the World Jewish Congress. Professor Peckel has been recognized as one of the 40 most influential pro-Israel leaders in Latin America by Jewish News Syndicate, and awarded the Center of the Iberian and Latin Communities in Israel Prize for his leadership in the Latin American Jewish communities. Professor Peckel tonight will share his research related to the European Jewish migration to South America prior to and after the Holocaust. He will also discuss how the Jewish immigrants adjusted to and fostered the creation of a new culture in Colombia and South America. Professor Peckel will also speak about the efforts made currently and in the past to promote South America's support of Israel. With that, I introduce you to Professor Marcos Peckel.
Okay, good evening to everybody. It's really a pleasure to be here with you and share a few stories about Latin American Jews. I want to thank Scott for inviting me. I want to thank Congregation Beit Tikva, and of course, quiero saludar a mi amiga Jenny, que está desde Cincinnati, que fue la que me invitó acá. Jenny, thanks for inviting us and organizing this. I'll start talking about Latin America a bit. maybe from the present to the past, we are about 500,000 Jews in Latin America today. But there's the community is divided in two, Argentina and the rest. And it has to do with size does matter, and it has to do with antiquity. For the oldest community by far is Argentina. And today, about 40% of Latin American Jews live in Argentina. We talk about 200,000. Used to be much more. Many Argentinian Jews emigrated because Argentina is an unfunctional country. So it's about 100,000 Argentinian Jews in Israel, and there is Argentinian Jews everywhere in Canada, in the United States, in Panama, wherever. Argentina community was one of the main destinations when Jews started emigrated in huge quantities from Europe, especially from the Pale of Settlement. You know, the Pale of Settlement is that area which comprises Poland, Lithuania, Ukraine, and Belarus, and part of Russia, where in 1850, about 60% of world Jewry were living there. I'm talking about probably 8 million Jews were living in the Pale of Settlement. And they started migrating to the Americas about 1880 because of the pogroms, because of economic situation, because looking for opportunities, and where most of them emigrated to the United States, some to Canada. Actually, about 2 million migrated from the Pale of Settlement to the United States, about a number much less to Canada, and then to South America. But South America, of course, South Africa and Australia, you know that the community of South Africa is comprised mostly from Lithuanian Jews. South America nobody knew everything about South America, and South America was really nothing on those days. There was no development, there was no opportunities, there were no cities, there was no transportation, there was no ways to get in there, except for Argentina. Argentina was a big magnet for Jews, especially because one of our big Jewish philanthropists, the Baron de Hirsch, Moshe de Hirsch, bought land in Argentina to settle Jews there. Actually, some anti-Semites today, they say that Jews wanted to build a state, a Jewish state in Argentina, even before Palestine or before Birobidzhan or before Uganda. So Argentina opened opportunity for Jews. So from 1880, 1890, there were Jews arriving in Argentina. This is one of the main reasons why Argentina is a different community, because it's oldest. And because it's the oldest community, it suffers the same problems that oldest communities suffer. Large numbers of assimilation, mixed marriages, and deep divisions because it's an older community. While the rest of the Jewish communities in Latin America, they come from the 1920, 1930, and after the Holocaust, so the newer communities. Another reason that separates Argentina Jewish community from the rest is socioeconomic. While most Argentina Jews are middle class, or let's say high middle class, you can find also working class among Jews in Argentina. You don't find that in the communities in the rest of of Latin America. What are the other communities in Latin America? After Argentina comes Brazil. Brazil comprises to about 120,000 Jews spread all over the country, Rio de Janeiro, Sao Paulo, Belize, Belo Horizonte, whatever. After that, Mexico, which is a very interesting community close to you, which is about 50,000 Jews, and then the rest. And when we talk about Jewish communities in Latin America, and I'll tell you the numbers, you might laugh about it. If I tell you that in Colombia or in Chile, let's start with Chile, there are 15,000 Jews, and we consider it a very large community. That might be a small neighborhood somewhere in New Jersey of the Jewish population. or somewhere in Chicago. So numbers now don't matter that much. We have also a Sephardic, a very important Sephardic migration in all of Latin America. I will talk about later. But the European migration to Latin America, other than Argentina, started arriving Jews in the 1920s, 1930s, also running away from poverty, from persecution, and then, of course, from the rise of Nazi Germany. It was the way Jews migrated to Latin America, other than Argentina, was by families. One family member would take a boat somewhere in France or somewhere in Dansk or somewhere in Europe, take a boat to somewhere, he arrived to that somewhere, and then he realizes he's in Colombia, or he's in Chile, or he's in Panama, or he's in Costa Rica. Many Jews learned the name of the country upon arrival. And some of them leave the boat before the final destination. Some of them might be going to Chile, but the boat stopped in Panama or in Colombia. They decided to live there because they were tired of the trip, and they disembarked there, and then they started bringing their families. Latin American communities are organized by the place of origin, and we still like that. That's why I say that newer communities. So the synagogues and the communities were organized. Those who came from Romania, those who came from Poland, those who came from Belarus, those who came from Minsk, those who came from Vilna. They created their own community. Until today, most communities are organized as such, except that some of them have merged because they have lost the numbers at the beginning. But we still talk a lot about our origin, and we laugh about, we bully each other because of the place of origin. Like my family came from Germany, and so I'm German Jews. German Jews created their own communities everywhere. Hungarian Jews created their own communities as well. So there was the Hungarian synagogue, the German synagogue, the Polish synagogue, and Jews arrived, European Jews arrived in Latin America penniless. And this is very important. The first people who came to Latin America, they have nothing. They have the clothing they were wearing and the suitcase they were carrying. Many started doing whatever they could, selling things on the streets. But the most important thing is Jewish communities or Jewish that arrive, the very first thing they built was a cemetery and a Hebra Kaddish. Then a tzedakah or a fundraising to help other migrants that would be coming. And slowly, that's an amazing story. Just in Latin America, they started advancing socially, economically, in a manner that is really amazing. How they started building companies, started building wealth, not knowing the language, not knowing the place. And that's the way they did it in Latin America. I guess that's the way they did it in other places too. I guess that's the way they did in America too, in North America, in the United States. Sephardis came in two big waves. The first wave, of course, with the Spanish conquistadores, because remember that the discovery of America was the same year that Jews were expelled from Spain, in 1492. 1492, when Jews were expelled from Spain in el decreto de Granada in 1492 was in March, and Jews were given till July to leave. The last day of the last deadline that the Spanish monarchy gave to the Jews actually fell on, I think, Tisha B'Av. So Jews asked for another day. And finally, Jews left almost in July, August. And remember that in October of that year, Colón started his trip to the Americas. And many of Colón and others that came later with the conquistadores españoles were Jews, or were converted Jews, or were marranos, or were Jews that have abandoned completely Judaism and were not interested in going back. So the fact that in Latin America, there were three places where Inquisition was being followed was in Lima, in Mexico, and in Cartagena, Colombia, speaks loud of the fact that there were Jews practicing Judaism in secret. And this is an interesting story. But from those Jews that came with the conquistadores, not much is left, almost nothing. They eventually they're assimilated and they abandoned Judaism. And then the Sephardics that came 1930, 1940, 1920, 1950, they mostly from Aleppo, from Syria, then from Turkey, of course, Smyrna, Edirne, some from Egypt, and from Morocco. There were many Jews that came from Morocco to Venezuela. But the big amount of Sephardic Jews in Latin America are from Aleppo. And this is important because Aleppo Jews are extremely wealthy. They actually, the wealthiest communities in Latin America are comprised of Aleppo Jews. They created their own synagogues, their own Sephardic synagogues. And here in all of Latin America, we have the same Sephardic and the Ashkenazis divided from the place of origin. Sephardic are divided only in Mexico, where you have Aleppo, Damascus, and Jews from Turkey. In the rest, the Sephardic communities are one. How long am I speaking? Okay. This is more or less the immigration. Jewish communities in Latin America are organized different than in North America and different than in Europe. We build communities. A community is an institution which has a legal founding, which is registered with the government. And a Jewish community can be 1, 2, 3, the Ashkenazi community. And the communities have the cemetery, the tzedakah, the school, the home for older people, youth organizations. So the communities here comprise everything. All the services are under one roof. So you belong to one community and you get all the services. You don't have to, for example, for cemetery, you don't have to, cemetery, you don't pay. When you die, you have the right of cemetery because you belong to a Jewish community. This is the way it's organized. This is one way of Latin America. This is one way I think that makes Latin American communities unique. The way the community, the organization were built. That is under one roof, everything. Most communities, with the exception of Argentina, are prosperous communities. They're wealthy. They can help. There's always a lot of people, 10%, 20% of Jews that require help to pay for the school, to pay for the food, to pay for medical services. The community provides. So Jews really don't have to go to the government for that. The Jewish communities in all of Latin America have social services for the Jews themselves. I think with regards to migration to Latin America, so the other communities I mentioned, I will mention them in order of size. Argentina, about 200,000. Brazil, about 120,000. Mexico, about 50,000. Then Chile, about 18,000. Panama, which is the fastest growing community in Latin America. I would say even the only one who is really growing is Panama, which has grown from migration for countries like Colombia, Venezuela, Argentina, Panama, about 15,000 Jews. Then Venezuela is a sad story, which used to be a community of 30,000, and today is about 5,000, because 25,000 Jews from Venezuela left after Chavez came to power, started implementing anti-Semitic policies, anti-Israel policies, and many because of the economic situation. So Venezuelan Jews left to Israel, to Canada, and to Miami. So a community used to be about 30,000, is today about 5,000, and really is one of these sad stories of Jewish communities in Latin America. And in my country, in Colombia, we are 5,000 Jews, but we must have been about 25,000. But Colombia is a country that has suffered from violence, kidnappings since the late 1970s. So we have had migration all the time. So we are much more Colombian Jews outside the country than in the country. But we are a well-established community. I will talk 5 minutes more about Colombia. Colombia is the strongest ally of the United States in all of Latin America by a far margin. Since the Korean War, Colombia was the only country that joined the Korean War under the US command in 1950. Colombia has a free trade agreement with the United States. Colombia has strategic cooperation with the United States, but Colombia is also the most important ally of Israel in Latin America. Has been that for years. So that makes an interesting triangle, or trio if you want, threesome if you want, Colombia, Israel, the United States. The community here is very well organized. We have an umbrella organization, which the one I'm the general director, and we do a lot of political work. We belong to the big international Jewish organizations, like the American Jewish Committee. We're part of the American Jewish Committee. We participate in all American Jewish Committee meetings, the Global Forum in Washington. We also belong to the World Jewish Congress, and we work with the ADL as well, because the American Jewish organizations are for us like an anchor, a strong anchor of where we can go in case of trouble, where we can go in case of advice, where we can feel that we're part of something much bigger, because we communities in Latin America, we're really small communities, and we need that friendship of the big, large North American Jewish organizations. I think that I will stop here, probably take some questions of you. Anything you want to ask about Colombian Jewry, South American Jewry. One more thing I would like to add is about regarding to Jewish religious divisions. In Colombia, for example, all the communities are nominally Orthodox communities, which means that the synagogue follows the Orthodox rite, but people are not Orthodox at all. So we might go to an Orthodox synagogue driving our car on Yom Kippur with a sandwich in the car. So it means that we are non-observant or observant of tradition, but belong to Orthodox communities. In the south of the continent, in Chile, Argentina, Uruguay, most of the Jewish communities are conservative. There's not many Reformed communities in Latin America. Maybe it's one in Argentina, and I think that's it. Maybe one in Brazil as well. In the north of the continent, from Colombia, Venezuela, Peru, Ecuador, Costa Rica, we mostly Orthodox communities, but in the way I told you. These people are not Orthodox. The The amount of people that eat kosher is not larger than 15-20%. People that shomer Shabbat, not more than 10%. But very traditional. We keep all the holidays, and we always celebrate Shabbat in family Friday night. That's a Latin American tradition. The family is always together Friday night. With this, I'm finished. Scott, to you.
Before I offer Professor a few questions, if anyone has questions that they'd like to offer, please place it in the chat and we will make sure that your questions are answered. The one thing that you talked about, which reminded me of Europe and the immigrants coming to South America, it reminded me of a shtetl in a way, the way that the communities are set up now. But how different is it from being in Europe versus how it was established in South America?
Well, we're not shtetls because except actually there was a shtetl in Argentina. The first community, Moisesville, built by the Barón de Hirsch, was actually the model of the shtetl transferred to South America. But that's the only example. The rest, we didn't have Jewish policemen. We didn't have Jewish. We came to live in the cities, in ghettos within the cities. So the Jews keep living together, of course, in the same neighborhoods. I would say, and as answering your question, I would tell you, Scott, that 70 years after our parents arrived, 50 years, 40 years, we still have 1 foot on a ghetto and 1 foot outside the ghetto. So we're still very much a bubble within our countries, especially with the exception of Argentina, of course. We feel that we belong, but not that much. So I think that I'm answering your question, but I would say that Jews that immigrated to America in the 1850s were the same. It takes 3 or 4 generations to get out of the ghetto. We now in the 3rd generation, I would say that the 4th or 5th generation will finally get out of the ghetto, but we still have 1 foot in a Jewish ghetto. Not a shtetl, but a ghetto.
Understood. Noting that there's been a uprise of anti-Semitism in North America, has there been the same situation in whether it be Colombia or in different countries in South America?
The answer is clear, God, no. We haven't experienced the same level of anti-Semitism in Latin America than you experience in North America or in Europe. I'm the commissioner for anti-Semitism on the Latin American Jewish Congress. We did a study, a very deep, profound, deep study now after the Gaza war in May, after the Gaza war in May. There is prejudice against Jews, yes. People think that Jews have too much power, maybe. Which, by the way, I don't think that's a bad thing that people think that, by the way. That's another discussion. People might think that Jews keep for themselves, which, of course, we keep for ourselves, and that's true. Dual loyalty, yes, but I don't think that having dual loyalty is a bad thing. It is a good thing, too. So there's some prejudice, but there's no anti-Semitic acts. There's no graffiti. There's no attack on people, of course. Taking very isolated incident, leaving out the AMI attack, it was a terrorist attack committed by Hezbollah and Iran. We haven't experienced in Latin American history anti-Semitic attacks, except a few isolated cases, which doesn't mean that it might not, the anti-Semitism might not rise, because there is prejudice. And you see it on social networks. And of course, Israel is the big elephant in the room. We experience a lot of anti-Semitism from left-wing circles related to Israel. but it's not in the same level. We don't have BDS in Latin America, for example. BDS, except for the case of Chile, where you have 400,000 Palestinians in Chile, very militant. They support Hamas, they don't support the Palestinian Authority. BDS in Latin America, they're just Facebook page. We don't have Israel Apartheid Week. So it's anti-Semitism we have prejudice, anti-Semitism may rise, but it's not at the level that you're experiencing either in North America or in Europe.
So you're saying that going to a shul or going to a Jewish function, it's pretty wide open so that you don't feel that you need the security. You can feel freedom to wear a kippah. There is no hard feelings that there could be some issues. So
Go on.
no, I'm just saying that here in North America, unfortunately, at a synagogue now we have security. That's part of our being now. But it sounds like the way you're saying that there's a different atmosphere, a different environment in South America.
Well, in synagogues, we don't have security. I don't know if you know, Scott, that in Latin America, all Jewish communities have a bitajón, security organization. We take care of the security of the community and work very closely with the authorities, with the police, with the intelligence services, and with the army. But just more preventive than it really hasn't been any attacks on synagogues in Latin America, maybe some graffiti once in a while, and Jews can go to universities. They don't have to fear anything other than being the wallet picked somewhere or the cellular being picked somewhere on the bus. So it's really, we don't have any issue on that. Security is a concern, especially after AMIA, but security not because of attacks by terrorism might get to us as well, and Middle East terrorism might attack any country where they feel they can attack. It might happen in Argentina, it might happen in Colombia, it might happen in Mexico, in Brazil. But anti-Semitic attacks to institutions or people are extremely rare in Latin America and very isolated cases. Remember, we have a case in Uruguay 4 years ago with a Jewish man was stabbed on the street by a deranged newly converted Muslim that cried Allah Akbar and killed him. This kind of thing happened once, but other than that, we don't have to fear, except, as I said, terrorism, which is the same fear you might have against terrorist attacks.
Let me pose some questions to you that I'm receiving. So this is from Janet. If you are saying that there isn't anti-Semitism in South America as we have here, are Jews migrating to the United States for the same reason the other South Americans are, violence, economic reasons?
Absolutely. The fear of the left taking power, which is now happening in Peru, which happened in Venezuela before, the economic situation, Latin America is extremely unstable now. I see Latin America being in a very, very dire situation. It was bad before COVID, and COVID make it worse. So it's dire here in Colombia, it's dire in Peru. We have a left-wing president elected in Peru, extreme left. So mostly for economic reasons, for fear of the left, and fear mostly of lack of hope for the future. This is happening in Latin American countries that is prompting migration mostly to the United States. Anti-Semitism is not the main driving force. And I'm not saying that there is no anti-Semitism in Latin America. There is, but not in the level that we see in North America. It's not the main driving force for migration from all of Latin America to the United States, Israel, or Canada, or Australia.
This is from Anne. In the United States, many families are more observant and part of the synagogue until the children are age 13, are bat mitzvah age. So they go to services more, celebrate Shabbat more until the kids graduate. Given the difference in your community organization, is that different in Colombia? Does the level of religion observance change depending on the kid's age? or participation in the synagogue or community life?
I don't think I have a one answer for that. I think every case is different. We don't have we keep traditions. We have bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvahs. After bar mitzvah, some kids put tefillin the day of the bar mitzvah and they will never put it again until they old enough, like when they have grandchildren. Some keep putting tefillin every day. Some do it once in a while. And and there's a trend in the Jewish people that we have more people becoming more observant. This is a real trend, becoming more observant of Jewish halacha. And we see that here too, but mostly we are a tradition community. We keep all the traditions, Seder de Pesach, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. People go to synagogue in Yom Kippur, but not all of them fast. I don't think that a kid that makes bar mitzvah or a girl that makes bar mitzvah will become more or less observant. It's not a trend that I can identify with. Maybe some people will do it, but I don't think it's a trend.
Let me give you next question. Can you please, this is from Lynn, can you please address the secular Jewish institutions? In Argentina, there are social and sports institutions like HaKoach, Maccabi. There are also Jewish schools that are not religious.
Take Lynn. We have these organizations as well. We have Maccabi. We have the schools here are not religious at all. They teach religion. They have a pray every morning, but the boys don't wear kippah, and there is no difference between boys and girls. There's not any kind of difference. They don't sit in different classrooms or they travel in different buses. So they're quite secular in that way. Of course, we teach Jewish history, we teach religion, and the daily pray is done, but it's not compulsory. So after a certain level, the kids that don't want to go to the daily pray, they can go to they have some alternative. We have Maccabi, we have sports organizations, we have women organizations that do, and we have also a very important thing that I didn't mention. We do a lot of social work towards the Colombian society. So we have organizations in charge of, for example, during the COVID time, we distributed more than 20,000 food rations to people, medicines to hospitals. So this is one of the works we do as well. So we're pretty secular in that way, but we wouldn't define ourselves completely secular, but we have those secular organizations. We have B'nai Brit and others.
Let me continue. In America, we are struggling with keeping a younger generation connected to Israel. What is the support for Israel like in Latin America?
This is the growing pains that we have when you become a large community. In Latin America, with the exception of Argentina, support for Israel is unanimous. It's extremely strong among young people. I will tell you a story of Colombia. Many kids that graduate from school in Colombia, many, I would say 5 or 6 each year, which is a large number, join the Israeli army as volunteers. My kid did, my son did it. Others go to Akshara program. Support for Israel is extremely strong. And I would say that there is no alienation with Israel. There is no Colombian Jews in BDS, for example. Actually, the BDS leader in Colombia is a New Jersey Jew that emigrated, came to Colombia 10 years ago. Schwartz is his name, in case you have it in the blacklist there. And he organized BDS in Colombia. So this is not exactly the case everywhere. Argentina might be a bit different, might be more similar to the United States. But in all the rest of Latin America, support for Israel is extremely strong. Kids go to Israel before they finish high school. And when I mean kids, I'm talking about 90% of kids go to Israel. And support for Israel is strong, strong, strong. I hope we keep it that way. But remains to be seen. We do a lot of education. We do a lot of Israel traveling. Education is part of our tool to keep our youngest identify with Israel.
So at this point, I'm waiting. If anyone has any more questions, please pose them. But you mentioned the fact that there's a triangle between the relationship of the United States, Israel, and South America. And in the case you're talking, that Colombia seems to be
Colombia.
the strongest of the South American countries. Not getting involved from a political standpoint of whether one president or one country leader is stronger than the other, but has there been a continuing growing relationship? I know you mentioned that Colombia has the strongest at this point. Considering the environment that Israel is experiencing and here in the United States, does it continue to be that strong? And does it, from whether it be leaders from the past to the present?
It has grown, but Latin America, the elephant in the room, I'm sorry to repeat that expression, is that Latin America is so polarized, and the polarization between left and right, and there's nothing in the middle, might affect Israel should a left-wing government came to power. And that's happened in Brazil, that happened in Venezuela, of course, that's happened in Mexico a little bit, not much. So in Colombia, we have I can tell you something. Colombia is going to open a technological, scientific trade office in Jerusalem, which is an official Colombian government office in Jerusalem. Not the embassy, but is an official government office with the flag of Colombia. So the Colombian relation with Israel and Colombian relation with the United States has to do a lot with many things. In the latest year, because of course the war on drugs, in which Colombia needs the United States help for that. You know that Plan Colombia. Colombia was, during the first decade of this century, the third largest recipient of US aid after Israel and Egypt. Colombia received an amount of about $10 billion in about 14 years of US aid for fighting drugs, fighting left-wing insurgency, fighting all kinds of things. The fact that there is a democratic government now didn't change the relationship between Colombia and the United States. Secretary Blinken has talked to President Duque many times, has talked to our new Minister of Foreign Affairs, who was in Washington, and meet Secretary Blinken. And the relation with Israel also relates to military aid, but also to, there's a free trade agreement between Colombia and Israel, for example. It's one of the countries in Latin America that has free trade with Israel, but the free trade agreement with Israel in Colombia is the newest agreement, which is not related to products, but to investment and to joint ventures. So it's really interesting, free trade agreement. Military cooperation is important, but also technological exchange. Israel helps Colombia with water issues, with agriculture, and with innovation. And I think that, but as I said before, we have the risk of a left-wing government coming to power. Yes, we do. If it's likely to happen, I'm not sure. I don't think. But should a left-wing government come to power, we don't know what will happen. Because relationship with Israel is so strong that even left-wing, we just met the top left-wing candidate, and he said that Israel for him is very important for all kinds of things. So I say that Latin America is a complex continent at this time. You might have in Chile, for example, a very left-wing government coming to power in November election. And you might have a left-wing government coming to power back in Brazil, which has a very complex relation with Israel before Lula da Silva. So this is a continent where it's hard to make predictions, and I would like to dare to make strong prediction up for 10, 15 years, I don't know.
So I'm going to tie in a question that I'm going to give you, plus what I'd like to present to you. So obviously you felt strong enough, and economically and socially, culturally, that you felt comfortable staying in Colombia. And the question now is, your children and their generation, do they feel the same way that your generation has felt about staying home? And then tying in with that, the question is, so if the youth go off to Israel and serve in the army, are they interested in staying in Israel, or do they want to come back to Colombia?
This is a tough question you're asking, because I would like to give you my wish and not the real answer. But I think the situation in Latin America is so complicated at this point. Economically, socially, the social contract is broken in these societies. That's creating a lot of uncertainty. And uncertainty is the worst thing for a Jew. And so I would say that younger generations are having second thoughts about staying. The most, I would say, and I would like to generalize, but Brazil is a very strong community, not known for a lot of Jewish migration, but there is migration now from Brazil to Israel. Argentina was always a dysfunctional country for the last 100 years, so always Jews were living. And here in South America, in the rest, Colombia, Chile, Peru, Mexico, the political situation, the polarization, and the economic uncertainty are making people think twice about staying in the country where they were born, and they're looking for opportunities either in the United States or in Israel, and that's the hard truth.
So I do not see any other questions. Please pose them. But I'd like to offer something, not to embarrass our guest, but I have a little story that, as you can see how successful our speaker has been in growing the community and himself growing. But I have this story where that in his youth, he attended Hebrew day school, and in that time, Hebrew day school was a full Jewish community of Jews going to the school, as I've been told. But I also been told, as how intellectual our speaker has been, that he was the troublemaker, and it was every Sunday that he was being under detention for his lack of interest in school. But as you can see today, you can see how successful he is, and it is see, he's not wearing the stripes of prison today, but he's wearing the stripes of success.
Scott, you know that many troublemakers in school became very successful. Some of them became successful in business, and in America, some of them became successful in other things. So I like that story that Jenny told you. I see Jenny laughing. And there were good days when we were going to school. I would tell you that Jewish schools still exist. It's a great school. It's It's the main Hebrew school in Bogota and the main Hebrew school in the country. And actually, it's the only school. We have 4 schools in Colombia, 4 Hebrew schools, but the only one that has a really strong Jewish majority. 90% of the pupils are Jews. In the other schools, only 10% of the pupils are Jews, the others are non-Jews, but the school became a business for the community because schools are private. So Jewish schools are very good. So you have a 3-4 year waiting list to get in Jewish schools outside of Bogota, which became a great business for the community to pay for the services that they need. Yeah, being a troublemaker wasn't always an honor card to show, but today maybe it is. Yeah.
Let me give you a couple other questions, if I may. You mentioned
Go ahead.
you mentioned the internal self-sufficient community focus of both Ashkenazi and Sephardic Jews. My perception is that there are close communities and they are not welcome to Jewish outsiders who are not like themselves. Is this a correct perspective?
Can you repeat, Scott, again? Can you please repeat it?
Sure. You mentioned the internal self-sufficient community focus of both Ashkenazi and Sephardic Jews. My perception is that there are close communities and are not welcoming Jews outsiders who are not like themselves. Is this a correct perception?
Okay, let me answer if I got right the question. Okay, we have Ashkenazi and Sephardic communities, of course, but we very, very united today. I would tell you that in the 60s, if you come with you're an Ashkenazi young guy and come home to introduce your Sephardic bride, that would be a problem. It would be a real problem. Maybe not as bad as, and I'm sorry to use that word, maybe not as bad as a goy, but closer. That was in the 60s. That's not the case anymore. And yes, we are close communities, that's true. We opened the doors to Venezuelan Jews that came to Colombia, but we still, as I told you before, Scott, 1 foot on the ghetto. So we are not that open to, we do conversions, but conversions few. We are close communities, that's a fair assessment. For the exception of Argentina, that's a fair assessment of all of Latin America. That we close communities and I would think that that's something that the next 1 or 2 generations will get away with or get rid of.
That was a question by Donna. The next question is from Lynn. Is there a growing presence of Hezbollah in Argentina, Brazil, and Paraguay border area?
Thanks, Lynn, for the question. No, the growing of Hezbollah is actually in Venezuela. In the triple border of Paraguay, Brazil, and Argentina, which was where AMI attack originated from, Paraguay has done a great job flushing out most Middle East migrants that were there at the time of the AMIA terrorist attack. Hezbollah presence is a worry for all of us in Latin America, from Mexico to Argentina, because of the strong presence of Hezbollah in Venezuela. And that, we know, for example, tomorrow I'm gonna meet the heads of police in Colombia, generals and colonels. I'm gonna give them a talk about that exactly. The growing presence of Hezbollah in Venezuela. You know, Venezuela has strong relation with Iran. Iran presence in Venezuela is strong in numbers, and is also worrisome for the United States as a country, not for the Jews. It's worried for Colombia as a country, and is worried for the Jewish communities. This is the main worry we have with regards to terrorism is Hezbollah presence in Venezuela, and we don't see a way out of that in the near future.
So I'm going to finish up with two questions and then we'll finish. This is from Miera. How did the Sephardic communities accept Ashkenazi Jews from the countries affected by the Holocaust?
I never thought of that. I never thought that was an issue at all. It's true that Sephardic communities didn't suffer as much from the Holocaust, but they did. Remember Thessaloniki. But this was never an issue. We all commemorate the Yom HaShoah, all the communities together, Sephardic and Ashkenazi, and also the International Holocaust Remembrance Day, the 27th of January. We do a big event, all the communities together, Sephardic and Ashkenazi. And I never thought that's an issue, that Sephardic Jews will feel less identified by the Holocaust as Ashkenazi ones.
Let me give you two more. I'm sorry. You
No
mentioned
problem.
you mentioned the rise of left wing, but you didn't make any mention of the right wing government. Is there any concern from that standpoint? And that's from Bob.
Yeah, well, we're right-wing governments in Latin America. We have the case of Guatemala and Brazil, but right-wing governments today, they have one interesting thing. They're extremely friendly to Israel. You have Viktor Orban in Hungary, and we have the most right-wing people you might think of, very friendly to Israel. Even if some of their followers or some of their own ideology come from the extreme right anti-Semitic that we know from before, but not in Latin America. In Latin America, right-wing anti-Semitism exists, but it's not an issue. Existing very isolated, marginal, how you say, marginal groups. So when a right-wing government comes to power in Latin America, it becomes very good friend of Israel and a very good friend of the Jews, and it's not a thing that we see as a threat at this point. At this point.
It sort of reminds me of in Cuba, where the Jewish community has had a relationship with the government over the course of the years. So it kind of reminds me of what you're speaking about. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, and I know very well the Jewish community of Cuba, but it's not during the years, it's the last years. It wasn't good all the time. There were a lot of Jews in Cuba before the revolution. There were around 15,000 Jews in Cuba. Most of them left. A few remained. Today you have about maybe 1,500 Jews in Cuba, out of which some of them are Cubans that converted. And the community has enjoyed actual freedom the last, I would say, 15 to 20 years. The Joint, one of the, the Joint organization, we work with the Joint is an American organization as well. Jewish Joint Distribution Committee has helped Jews in Cuba for the last 20 years with kosher food, with Pesach, matzah and all that. And the community is there, but it also has the same problem. Economically, it's not a strong community because nobody in Cuba is. So you don't have the Jewish tycoon in Cuba, like you have everywhere in the rest of Latin America. But the country, the Jewish community is enjoying freedom. They participate in Maccabi games. They come to our Jewish events here. When we organize a Jewish event of Latin American communities, we have the Cubans here. They come and they participate and they go back to Cuba. So at this point, they enjoy freedom, not economic prosperity, but freedom. And they freedom to open the synagogue, even freedom to go to Israel and visit Israel and go back. Although there is no relation with the Cuba and Israel, they can go to Israel and they have no problems when they go back to Cuba.
Last question is, and most important is, how did your parents choose Colombia? How did they support themselves?
They came at different stages. My mom my parents married here in Colombia. They were second marriage for both of them. My mom came in 1939 from Poland. She took a ship in France. She arrived to the main harbor of Colombia, Pacific Ocean in Buenaventura, where she descended from the ship. All she saw was black people, Afro-Colombian people, because that's the people from there, which she never seen one of such in Europe. She didn't speak the language. And she went up to Bogota, and she started working with not German Jews, German citizens who were living here. And she worked for them. They started giving her work. First of all, sewing. My mom's father was a tailor in Dansk, and my mom knew how to sew. So she went to the sewing. They will give her the fabric, and she would sew clothing for them, and then she would sew some more. And she was a clapper. You know the word clapper in English, when you clap on the door to sell something. You clap on the door. The house owner opened the door. What do you want? I'm selling this. Please buy. And they slap the door on you. That's the way she started, and she built a factory. She built a large factory of clothing by 1955. My father's history is extremely interesting. My father left Germany to Haiti. Haiti didn't want any white Jews or any white people. So the Jews that arrived in Haiti about 1936, 1937, fleeing Germany. My father fled Germany. His two brothers went to Palestine, and they became members of the Haganah. My father was a lawyer in Germany. He was very German, like most German Jews. He was first German, then Jew. And so he finally left. He arrived in Dominican Republic. And the story of Dominican Republic of the dictator, Rafael Leonidas Trujillo, is very interesting. Trujillo was a dictator, was the strongest dictator. He was 30 years in power. And he surrounded himself with German Jews to manage the technical parts of the state. The central bank, customs, tax, and the factories that he had. Because he knew German Jews were very able. They will not threat him in any way. And that's why Dominican Republic is not Puerto Rico, which is an associated state of the United States. Dominican Republic became very independent because of German Jews that managed the technical part of the state, while Trujillo was killing his opponents. Eventually, Trujillo was deposed in 1960, was killed, and many of those German Jews ran away. But my father left in 1955 Dominican Republic to marry my mother, as a shidduch was made in Israel. So when he came here, he worked at my mother's factory. That's the story.
Very interesting. Wow. That's like going around the world to be able to come to South America and then eventually create a family. That's amazing.
Create a family. We have we have me and my sister. I was born in 1956. My sister 1958. Jenny 1956. Is older than me. Jenny is older than me. Sorry, Jenny. I'm getting back to you because of your comment about me being back.
Only by 3 weeks. I'm older than you. Only for 3 weeks. That's all.
3 weeks is 3 weeks.
It's not 3 years. It's just 3 weeks.
You can take this up in Spanish. That's okay. You're allowed.
Okay.
I get you. Okay, go on, Marcos.
Well, first of all, let me thank Marcos for a wonderful evening. I hope everyone gained, as I did, a fantastic education about what's taking place in Colombia, what's taking place in Latin America, and how strong a leader Marcos is for the community and for the Jewish community. And with that, I applaud him and wish him koach, continue work in what he's doing. In doing so, I want to thank his other sister in Cincinnati and her family, the Lichtenstein, for offering the opportunity to have Marcos speak tonight. With my friendship with Jenny, we were able to have Marcos speak this evening. And, you know, as Jews, we're always looking for opportunities. We have what in Hebrew we call protexia. We have opportunities that we take advantage of other people. And in this case, it was a wonderful opportunity to do so. And I thank herself and her two sisters who are on this evening for their friendship with Marcos. And I thank the community of South Jersey. And hopefully there are some out there from other parts of other countries listening in this evening. And I thank you all for joining us. And with that, I hope in the future, Marcos is welcome in our community anytime to come and visit. And I thank you again. And with that, I turn it over to Sabrina.
Thank you so much. I can't even tell you what a privilege it is to have been part of this evening. Thank you so much to Congregation Beth Tikva and Scott for inviting us to be part of it, Rabbi Nathan, and of course to Professor Peckel. What a great experience. I have family history where my family went from Morocco to Venezuela. So this is incredibly interesting and a great piece to add to my family history. And of course, I can't believe nobody asked about Argentina and the meat. Living in Israel, if you could get a steak from Argentina, that was like a huge thing. That's why you actually went to Jerusalem, to get steak from Argentina. So thank you very much. I'm here locally. The JCRC, the Jewish Community Relations Council, is the advocacy arm of the community combating anti-Semitism and supporting Israel. So learning from you tonight how our neighbors in the South are dealing with anti-Semitism, it's very interesting, and also how you have support for Israel. I definitely think there are things that we can learn from you, and I hope that in the future we'll be able to work together so that we can learn some of the secrets of how you're keeping your community so engaged. Anyhow, thank you everybody, and thank you once again, Scott, and thank you, Professor Peckel, for including us. Have a nice evening, everybody.